Well, good morning. Another month is rapidly slipping away as we've reached the last Sunday in April. That means that May will arrive on Wednesday of this week with a number of traditional observances, including Law Day, a day set aside in this country to celebrate the rule of law. We'll talk about that this morning with someone who has devoted his career to the law. It starts right now.
From TV6, this is The Ryan Report. Here's your host, Don Ryan.
Well, this Wednesday is Law Day, and this year the American Bar Association's theme is free speech, free press, free society, and focuses on these cornerstones of representative government. Our guest this morning devoted his career to the law. Judge Timothy Greeley recently retired as the magistrate judge for the United States District Court for the Western District of Michigan. His assignment was carried out primarily here in the Upper Peninsula at the federal courthouse in Marquette. Pleasure to welcome Judge Greeley to the Ryan Report. Nice to have you with us.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Before we talk about all those important law things, let's talk about you a little bit, give people a chance to know you. You grew up in Kalamazoo, I understand.
Yes, I was born in Battle Creek, and my father became a minister in Kalamazoo after I was about 2, and we moved there. I was raised there, went to undergraduate school at Western Michigan University, then moved to Detroit where I went to law school.
Okay, and you started your law career downstate too, I believe.
Yes, I clerked for a federal judge, which had a significant impact on me.
Right.
It was such a great job in Detroit, and then after that moved to Lansing where I was with a fairly large law firm. And I was there for 6 years and concluded that the practice of law wasn't right for me, and if I could get back into the judiciary, that's where I would be happiest.
Okay.
And I applied for and was very fortunate to get the job here in Marquette.
Did you ever think, as a young man that you might wind up working in the Upper Peninsula?
No.
No.
No, not at all. I had a few cases when I was in practice in the Upper Peninsula, and like many people who aren't from here, they think it's the end of the earth.
Yes, right. How did it come about that you were able to become appointed as the judge for this district?
Well, the position opened up, and it opened up primarily because the court concluded it needed to have a greater presence here in the Upper Peninsula. And they felt that the way to do that was to place a judicial officer in residence. So they got authorization from Congress to fill a position here. It was a new position. Jack Weber had been acting commissioner and would handle some matters, but this was a new created magistrate position. I applied for it. There were about 60 applicants, and at the time I was very fortunate to get it. I was very young. I was 33 years old. I happened to be the youngest federal judge in the United States at the time.
Did you feel you were ready to take on that responsibility as the youngest federal judge?
Well, at the time I thought I knew everything.
Okay.
So yes, I was sure I was ready for it. Now I know how much I didn't know and how much I needed to learn.
I was reading somewhere where you came in, there was quite a backlog of civil cases you had to deal with.
There were hundreds of particularly prisoner civil rights cases that had been needing the attention of the court. And I turned my attention to that first, because when I did come up here, there was no federal grand jury, there was no U.S. Attorney's Office, no federal public defender's office, and a limited presence of federal law enforcement. So you weren't seeing a lot of criminal cases. So that didn't take my time, and I had the ability to work on those civil cases.
And really, under your leadership since you've been here, the court really has grown, hasn't it?
Well, the court certainly has grown. I don't want to take responsibility for that, but I was part of this decision to have a greater presence in the UP. And I'm proud of what has happened up here. We now have a U.S. Attorney's Office with 2, soon to be 3 assistant U.S. attorneys. We have a federal public defender's office. We have an active law enforcement presence. And those people have helped make a difference.
Going back to when you first got here, I know that one of your early cases involved murder, a multiple murder case.
It was my first felony. I'd been here 6 months, and an individual killed 4 people on an Indian reservation, including an 18-month-old baby. And certainly that was an awakening for this community and for me to have to deal with that.
And this was in federal court because it was on
It occurred, the murders occurred on what's called Indian country. That's not my term. And because of that, federal court has jurisdiction.
Okay. And he was ultimately convicted.
He was convicted and is in prison right now.
Help our viewers understand how this court fits into the federal court system.
Well, the district court in the federal system is the trial court.
Okay.
And the Western District of Michigan is the trial court for the entire Upper Peninsula and the western half of the Lower Peninsula. The main court's in Grand Rapids, which is where most of the judges are. This court handles criminal matters and civil matters which arise within the Upper Peninsula.
And I think, you know, when most people think of federal court, they think of some business executive being tried for some financial crime. But really, federal courts can deal with almost every situation, can't they?
Yes, and the federal court in the Upper Peninsula deals with many types of criminal cases that most federal courts don't, because we have such a great presence of Native Americans and the court has jurisdiction over that. We see more violent crime, less white-collar crime. And also we have jurisdiction over crimes committed on federal land, and there's a fair amount of federal land here in the Upper Peninsula. And so we get cases that are outside the norm. We don't see very many white-collar crimes in the Upper Peninsula.
Right. Okay. We'll pick it up right there in just a couple of minutes. I'll be back with more after we take this 2-minute break. Again, we're talking with recently retired federal judge Timothy Greeley. We were talking about, you know, what winds up in federal court. How are those decisions made as to whether something goes to state court or federal court?
Well, on the criminal side, decisions as to which cases go to federal court are made entirely by the United States Attorney's Office. They have the authority to take a case to federal court. We don't decide. The court never decides that it wants a case there. It has to be brought there by the U.S. Attorney's Office. Now, what kinds of cases can they bring here? Well, we've already talked about crimes that occur within Indian country or crimes that occur on federal land. But in addition, Congress has passed a lot of laws making certain activity illegal. The drug laws are a good example. Another one is gun laws. Those cases come into federal court because the violation is a federal law. You know, one really interesting one right now is Michigan has passed a ballot initiative making marijuana legal.
Right.
Marijuana is illegal under federal law. So those cases would come to federal court now, and people who may be in compliance with state law could still be in violation of federal law.
At this point, is the federal government aggressively pursuing that? Or?
They are, with extensive grow operations or large distribution. They are not prosecuting cases of simple possession. I've never seen one.
Okay. And sometimes the sentencing guidelines are different, aren't they, between federal and state court? I'm thinking of capital punishment, for example.
Sentencing guidelines can be significant. It can result in significant differences between the sentence you'd get in state court or federal court. And sometimes cases are brought to federal court because there's a decision made by the U.S. Attorney's Office that this person needs to go to prison for a long time, and that's what's going to happen in federal court.
Let's talk about Law Day. Why is it important that we celebrate the law in this country?
Interesting. Before I decided to go to law school, I was going to be a history teacher.
Okay.
That was my goal. And the history of Law Day is kind of interesting. It was created during the Eisenhower administration as a way to respond to what the communists were doing.
Ah.
May 1st was May Day in most communist countries, and it celebrated the workers. And the Eisenhower administration decided we need something in response to that. So we're going to promote the rule of law. And now the ABA every year establishes a theme. this year is free press, free speech,
Right.
and free society. I think it can be very helpful if it helps to educate the public a little bit more about our rights, our Constitution, and our courts.
You know, and I was thinking about the decisions that a judge has to make, but really, you depend on the law, don't you? That's what really makes it work. It's not, well, I think this is a good idea or a bad idea. We have laws that guide us.
Yes, and it's why I went to the job and why I was so happy in the job. I didn't decide cases based on what I thought was right, what I thought was fair, what I thought was just. I decided cases based on what the law required. And we are a society of laws, and our courts work and work well because we follow those laws.
And as a judge, you know, people see judges sitting on benches in TV shows primarily, probably, but really there's a lot that goes on when you're not in public, right? And I assume research must be a big part of that.
Yeah, I probably spent at most 20% of my workday in the courtroom. Most of it was spent reading and writing and issuing opinions and orders, dealing with attorneys, helping to schedule cases, helping to move things forward.
You know, attorneys can be the butt of some jokes in this country, and sometimes it might be deserved, but really they are very important to our legal system, aren't they?
Very important. And they're the butt of jokes by people until those people need an attorney.
Right.
And then when they need one, they want a good one.
And you've probably seen a lot of attorneys, and some maybe rubbed you the wrong way, and some look favorably to you, but again, you didn't make decisions on that basis, did you?
No, you don't ever make a decision based on the fact that you may like or dislike an attorney.
But some attorneys are probably better than others, I assume.
Absolutely. And a fine attorney can make a difference.
Do you have any thoughts for people who may be appearing in court, not for a major crime, but you know, how they should compose themselves and how they should conduct themselves in any court?
That's a hard question. People are sometimes arrested and brought into court, so they have no control over what they're wearing. I've had people come in with the most obnoxious or obscene T-shirts that they're wearing in the courtroom. I wouldn't recommend that.
Okay. Dress for work. Huh?
Yeah, dress is important, and it's a solemn occasion in court, and so I think you should act appropriately.
Okay. I have some more questions for you in just a couple of minutes. We'll be back with more on the Ryan Report after we take one more break. Once again, we're talking with retired federal judge Timothy Greeley. Just talking during the break, during your career, you wind up seeing kind of the worst of our society. That's got to be difficult after a while.
It is difficult. I had to completely be aware of, the need to separate my personal life from my professional life and not bring it home. You see some horrendous crimes committed, sexual assaults on children, women who are beaten by their spouses or their significant others, and it's hard. You have to treat each and every defendant with respect and according to the law. But there were days when I went home and knew it would be a good day the last time I had to deal with someone who had committed one of those crimes.
Apart from situations like that, there must have been some other interesting cases in your
I got to
30
swear
years.
in a lot of new citizens over the years. Swore in people who had come to this country looking for a better life. And over the years, some of those people really made a difference in our community. One of them became mayor of our city. And that's a joyous occasion. I know immigration is a hot button item right now, but this country is made up of immigrants.
Right.
We're all immigrants. And those days are days when people have come here to join us for the right reasons. And it's nice to see people who are committed to the United States and want to be here and can make a difference.
Probably always a joyous occasion when you're dealing with new citizens.
Yes.
You had the John Stamos case, and that certainly brought a lot of media attention, even national attention to your courtroom. How did you feel about that?
I can't remember a case that got more attention than that one. I had the FBI out at my house 3 nights in a row getting warrants for that case. Seemed to me that it was the fact that John Stamos was famous that made that case interesting. The crime committed was not particularly egregious. It was 2 people who wanted to try and get some money from somebody. It wasn't a violent crime. But people were very interested in that. People are interested in celebrities. You must know that, Don.
Right.
So it was an interesting case. Doesn't stand out to me as one of those cases that is most memorable.
Okay. What about the future for the court? I understand you feel it's in good hands.
Well, I do. I'm very proud to have served the court. You look at our federal government right now, we have 3 branches. The executive branch, which is represented by the president, the Congress, which is the legislative branch, and the courts. Well, if you look at those 3, the courts are the ones who get their job done. We decide the cases. We don't get it done perfectly. We may make some bad decisions on occasion, but we get the job done. And we don't point fingers at the other branches of government and blame them for not being able to get our job done. We don't tweet. We get our work done. And I think the court is in very good hands here in Marquette and in the Upper Peninsula with the person who was appointed to take the position I had, Martin Vermont. I know he's going to do an outstanding job. But the network is there, and there are a lot of conscientious people working for that court and for the federal system who are doing their best to protect the people of the Upper Peninsula.
I know that in a previous interview, one of your concerns you expressed was about drug activity in the UP.
Drug activity, drugs is a huge problem in the United States. In the Upper Peninsula, methamphetamine is a significant problem right now. And what I've seen is when meth gets a hold of somebody, it doesn't let go. It's very hard for people to beat that addiction. And are we dealing with it? Are we addressing the problem? We're trying. One of the issues is oftentimes drug addiction is a result of some other underlying mental health issue. People are self-medicating. I don't think we're doing a very good job in this country addressing the mental health issues of our society. We've closed most of our mental hospitals, and so these people end up in prison. And that's not how to solve the problem.
Well, you've had an outstanding career, and we're glad you came to the Upper Peninsula 30 years ago. And I hope you enjoy your retirement years.
Thank you.
And thanks for joining us this morning to talk about that career and what the law means in the United States.
It's my pleasure.
Okay. I'll be back with some different thoughts for you in just a couple of minutes. So we've just about made it through that time of year when schools are canceled because of snow. Of course, in Upper Michigan, you never really know, but hopefully it's over for another winter. As I was thinking about school snow days, I couldn't help but recall how things were when I was a kid and when my own children were in school. First of all, for me as a kid, I think school was only canceled one time during all my school years, and that happened when I was in high school. I'd like to think we had fewer snow days because we were tougher back then. You know, the old walk to school 10 miles uphill both ways story. But there were really some other factors that came into play. I went to school in Ishpeming, and like many other districts, kids would walk to school because the districts were more compact, and there were more neighborhood schools. Driving school buses on slippery roads wasn't a big factor back then. When my kids went to school, it was a different story. There were snow days for them, but getting the word out that school had been canceled was another story. Many of you probably remember those days when you would get up, and if it was snowing pretty hard, you would do whatever you could to find out if it was a snow day. Unlike today when you can find out almost instantly, here on TV6 for example, just about your only choice back then was to check the local radio station. And if school was canceled, they would only make that announcement maybe 2 or 3 times every half hour. Might not seem that long to wait, but when you're anxious to know if you have school that day, it seemed like it took forever to get the information you were waiting to hear. And if you didn't hear those magic words, you couldn't really be sure if school had not been canceled. Maybe they just didn't announce it during that break. So you would sit there listening to some commercials and the DJ playing another record until the next break came to see if there was any chance you had a day off from school. As I said, today it's a far cry from the days when my kids were young. Besides finding out almost instantly on the TV6 website, many schools advise parents directly if school has been canceled. In Marquette, for example, you can get a text, an email, a telephone call, or all three. Those telephone calls in the middle of the night, or at least very early in the morning, can be an unexpected surprise when you're sound asleep. Of course, that does mean, for some, they can turn off the alarm and sleep in that morning. I wonder if they have something like snow days in Arizona. Perhaps some days it's too hot to go to school? Probably not. We don't have to worry about that here. I'll be back in a minute. Time for us to wrap it up for another week. The Today Show is just moments away. Do have time to remind you that you can get news anytime at uppermichigansource.com. You can also see a rebroadcast of this show at that same address. Thanks to Judge Timothy Greeley for joining us this morning to share some thoughts about his career and the importance of the law in our American society. And thank you for joining us. Let's get together again next Sunday morning.